Hello, my name is Jaidyn Chong. I am one of the senior teachers here at Vincent Music, and today I'm going to be giving a lesson on several little kind of beginner concepts which apply to the piano. I'm mainly going to be talking about the concepts of seconds and thirds and how they apply in some of the music and scales that we might learn. And I'm also going to be giving a bit of an introduction to both the bass and the treble clef, very briefly. But I'm also going to be talking about introductions of beats and concepts as well. So, to explore simply, going in terms of our kind of first notes that we might learn on the piano, usually we're told to the left of these two dark notes, these two ones which are actually C sharp or D flat, or otherwise D sharp or E flat, and just to the left of those two notes is a C natural. And that's where we will learn our first notes. So for finger 1, our thumb in our right hand, and for finger 5 in our left hand. So pinky and thumb. So, that's the introduction of where our scales, our first note is our C. But in terms of how we would go from there, it's a slightly different story entirely. So this then introduces the concept of seconds and thirds. I'll talk about the seconds first though. So, when we're talking about seconds, technically we're talking about both minor and major seconds here, but in terms of the seconds that we're talking about here, we're mainly talking about what's called our pentascale. So penta, the Latin word meaning 5. So with a pentascale, a 5-note scale. So in this case, we're talking about a 5-note scale going from C, D, E, F, G, and so on and so forth. So making sure that when we do these scales, we start with them hands separately. So depending on which hand you are, whether it's right hand or left hand, I would recommend doing them hands separately first. If you want to do the left hand first, easy. We just need to make sure that we're going from C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C, D, E, F, G. So, talking of vague introductions here, we've got C, D, E, F, G in this case, right? So, we need to make sure that we slowly become comfortable with them hands separately as well as hands together. And that's talking about mainly our seconds. But there are also other distances as well. And the reason why I mention that is because we have an introduction to our thirds. Now, our thirds are a very important concept here with music theory because depending on which position that we go to, whether it's a C major or otherwise adjust them a little bit, they can become a fundamental change in how we perceive our major or minor keys. But even on a more fundamental basis, there's figuring out the distance between going from one note at a time to the distance in space between two notes. So, in this little exploring thirds example that we have here, I'm going to be showing you a very slightly different example. So, with the example that I showed you before, it was going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, in this case, we're using these 3 finger numbers. Fingers 1, 3, and 5. And the same goes respectively with our left hand. So 1, 3, and 5. Right? So, with our right hand, we're going to make sure that we go up 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5. And with our left hand, making sure we go 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1. And you can end it in a slightly different way. You can do something similar as well. So G, 1, 3, 1, 3, 5. Right? Or you can otherwise do what we did with the right hand just then. We'll do something like this. Okay? So, I'll give a very brief overview as to where these two would go. So just to briefly recap the exploring seconds, I'm going to do it hands together just for the sake of time and brevity. But what we can do is that we make sure, as part of our pentascales, and this is a very good use of a warm-up as well, but making sure that we go from C. Now, this can be a hands together exercise or a hands separately exercise, or you can alternate between the two. So you can alternate between the two by doing similar to what I did with the right hand. Making sure that we have our hands on the keys as best as we possibly can. One of the big things that I personally like to teach about is having what's called the crux of support. Making sure that we are supported as best we can. Sometimes we'll have smaller fingers at the start. I mean, I've got decently long fingers for myself, but I know that whoever's going to be listening to this, they might have longer fingers, they might have shorter fingers. But irregardless of that, we need to make sure that we have a decent crux of support with how we support ourselves. Because if our hands just, like you see my thumb is hanging off here. I'll show you with my left hand, for instance. If my hand's hanging off here, or if I'm playing, yes, I'm playing on the tips of my fingers, but my thumb's not supported. And if I needed to use my thumb, I have to put it back on anyway, and it takes a little bit more effort than what I would like to do. So it's the use of economical motion for the hands, and in the case of the right hand, if I've got my thumb hanging out, it's a bit harder to see on the camera, but the thumb is hanging out. I'm going to have it back on anyway if I want to go to C. So, making sure that we have good thumb and finger support, and making sure as best as we can, keep our fingers on. So, with that, let's briefly go into our bass clef and our treble clef. So, when it comes to our bass and our treble clef, I will see if I can find a decent whiteboard marker for the moment. If it comes across poorly in the video, I do apologise. But, okay, I'm going to have to adjust the camera a little bit. It's not showing up. Darn, that's a shame. Unfortunately, I don't think I have any other whiteboard markers. No. Oh well. So, with our treble clef, or our bass clef, otherwise I'm going to have to do something similar to this. It's going to be a little bit messy, so I do apologise. Just so I can get some extra colour going on here. Nope, none of these work. That's a shame. So, with the treble and the bass clef, as you might see from your piano literature and your other books, what we have is we have what's called the G clef. So, transcribing it like this, or otherwise with the bass clef, we have the kind of little curl with the two dots there. Now, with the treble clef, with the G clef, that's a very important one because that's where we play with our right hand. So, with piano literature that you may or may not have seen, when we see this curly treble clef, or with a little curl and swirl at the bottom, that's where we play with all of our right hand materials. And with our bass clef, we always have to add the two dots after that's kind of little reverse C curl, basically. But we need to make sure that those two dots are there because they're there for historic reasons, because that's what's called the F clef, because the two dots are always circled around that note F in the ledger line. But in terms of how we would actively go about playing some of these notes, so very briefly talking about some of the bass and treble clef, the one note that kind of links those two clefs together cleanly is our middle C note. Now, this middle C note is important for historic reasons as well, but not maybe for the reason that you think. In the old pre-Gregorian chant music, which is around the 1500s or prior, when we were first starting to develop the concept of reading music, Gregorian monks had this kind of system where they would figure out which note is a middle C and they would just kind of play it. But over time, the system started to become more codified, and this note is in the higher echelon, the higher area of the bass clef, and on the lower end of the treble clef. So with this middle C that you'll see on the lowest end of the treble clef, or the middle C that you see on the highest end of the bass clef, they are exactly the same thing. The only difference in relation with how we would go for the piano is what hand we would use. So, if you see the bass clef and you see this middle C here, this is just using any finger that you want, but we would just play it with our left hand, and with our right hand, just on the lower end of the treble clef, that's where we'll play that. So, alongside that little kind of juxtaposition of kind of clefs, we also have our rhythmic and our time signature markings. So, with our time signature markings, the most common time signature that we typically have is our 4/4, or otherwise our common time. So, when we have 4/4, it means we have 4 beats in a bar. So, I'll briefly demonstrate something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and a 2, 3 and 4. Now, we also have something called 3/4 as well, which is one of the second time signatures, likely the most second time signature that you'll pick up, which is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3. So we have, in the case of 4/4, 4 beats in a bar, and in the case of 3/4, we have 3 beats in a bar. So 3 crotchet beats, 3 or 4 crotchet beats in a bar, respectively. So with this example here, we're not going to use any specific fingering. I'll just use finger 3 here. But what I want us to do is to see if we can copy down and play this rhythm as best we can. It's a rhythm set of every 2 bars where we accent the first beat. But what we need to do, and I'll just show you here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, swap. 4. 1, 2, 3. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a little example there where we are going to swap. Once we get to that middle C, which we will play with the right hand, can be anything you want, but I would recommend finger 3 just because when we're at this level of piano learning, it's around the strongest finger that we have. So better just not get involved with any form of scales. We're not doing like any, and I'll briefly demonstrate, we're not doing any A harmonic minor. We're not doing anything like that. We're just learning how to figure out where those notes will be and how we would play. So I'll play that 4-beat alphabet left again, starting with the left hand, and once I get to the middle C, I'll continue with my right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, with this 3-beat alphabet that we're going to be talking about as the final part for today, it's going to be, in some ways, a bit simpler, but in some ways simultaneously more difficult. Because we're not going to be stopping with any minutes or anything like that. Partly because of the structure of the 3/4 beat. Because unless you had a dotted minim, which is 3 crotchet beats in total, we would not be able to actually do anything like we did with the 4/4, where we'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, hold. You can't do that because you can only fit 3 beats into a 3/4 beat, unless you wanted to do some extra funky details leading past that. So, again, as before, I'll be using my right hand to go from middle C onwards. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I'm only just going to show that once, partly for brevity of time, but because we have a very similar concept as to what we talked about with the 4-beat alphabet just then. Anyway, that about wraps it up. So just very briefly, just wrapping up the concept, we talked about exploring our intervals of seconds. We can do the hands together or separately, however we choose. I would recommend hands separately first because it's always good to start separately when we're doing and learning new concepts of the piano. Otherwise, exploring thirds. Doing our hands separately and hands together when we're ready, and otherwise looking at our bass and treble clef when we see them in our piano literature. Anyway, that's all from me, and I hope you have a lovely day. Take care!